When she comes back into your life, it can take everything in you not to respond with raw emotion, especially if her time away left you with emptiness, unanswered questions, and a silence heavy with unresolved feelings. But the moment you react impulsively, you surrender your strength. You allow the narrative to be dictated by your longing rather than your clarity, and that's the mistake most men make. They allow the return of someone to immediately dictate their state of mind as if their identity is tethered to her presence. But you have to understand this. Your emotions are powerful, but they're not always accurate. They're often reactive, and reactivity in moments like these is weakness. It's not about suppressing your feelings, it's about recognizing them without becoming enslaved to them. Her reappearance doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't automatically indicate remorse or realization or depth. It could be a moment of loneliness, boredom, or convenience. If you rush to respond emotionally through excitement, flattery, or desperation, you become predictable. And predictability kills respect. Power is in composure. It's in making her wonder how much she still matters to you, because when someone walks away and then returns to find you exactly where they left you, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they know you haven't grown. You've waited, and waiting in silence is not the same as healing in silence. When you respond strategically, you communicate something far greater than mere detachment. You express transformation. You make it clear, without needing to declare it, that her absence was not the end of your story, but the beginning of your evolution, and that energy is undeniable. It's not cold, it's centered, and women feel the difference. They can sense when a man is no longer emotionally tied to their validation. That shift doesn't create bitterness, it creates mystery. It makes her wonder if you're still reachable, and that wondering pulls more than begging ever could. Responding strategically also means choosing your words with intention. You don't need to be rude, dismissive, or arrogant. You simply speak with calm restraint. You ask yourself, is this conversation worth engaging in? Is it aligned with who I am now? Or is it bait to pull me back into who I used to be? That awareness gives you the discipline to say less, to listen more, and to observe what her return is truly about. You don't need to prove anything. You don't owe an emotional explanation. Sometimes the most powerful message you can send is your energy, your silence, your delay in response, your lack of urgency. When you react emotionally, you chase. When you respond strategically, you lead. One keeps you in a cycle, the other sets you free. So when she reappears, let your response reflect your evolution, not your desperation. Let her feel that her absence didn't break you. It built you, because true power is never in reaction. It's in intention. When she reappears, it's tempting to think the right move is to either let her back in or shut her out entirely, but true power lies in restraint, controlled energy. You don't need to rush. In fact, the slower your response, the more power you gain. Before we jump into the video, I want to remind you that my exclusive online course on mastering the dating game is available now. If you've been learning from my YouTube videos, you're only scratching the surface. This course takes things to an entirely new level, teaching you everything you need to know about the dating game, from approaching a woman to building real attraction. We just finished section 5 in the course, and you won't find this information in any video on my channel. It's available in both English and Spanish, so you can learn in the language you feel most comfortable with. It's easy to access with a secure payment option. Visit thestoiccouple.podia.com or click the link in the description to enroll now and improve your dating life. Let's dive in. Most men lose their edge the moment she sends that message, makes that call, or casually pops back into their life. They jump. They respond immediately. They light up with excitement, and in doing so, they communicate one thing: you still control me. That's not strength. That's surrender disguised as enthusiasm. Controlled energy means you don't let her set the tempo. She might want an instant reply, a reaction, a reassurance that she still holds emotional gravity in your life. But you pause not out of ego, but out of respect for yourself. You take time to feel it, to think it through, to ask yourself whether engaging serves your growth or just reopens old wounds. Because if she left without explanation, or worse, came back expecting things to resume without accountability, then your pause becomes a mirror. It reflects her actions back to her without you needing to explain a thing. You have to understand something important. Timing is psychological leverage. When you slow things down, you remove her advantage. You're not dragging it out to punish her. You're rebalancing the dynamic, because relationships built on imbalanced emotional control rarely thrive. And if you want to reclaim your role as a man who's moved forward, you have to show her, not tell her that you're not emotionally parked where she left you. And this kind of control, it's subtle. You're not ignoring her, you're observing her. You're watching how she speaks, what she says, what she avoids. You're reading between the lines. If she's just testing the waters, you don't dive in, you wait. You don't respond to breadcrumbs with full course attention. Let her curiosity simmer. Let your calmness create tension, because tension, when managed well, creates respect. Controlled energy also shows up in your tone. You don't express excitement. You don't reveal disappointment. You speak neutrally, decisively, even warmly, but with boundaries. The kind of boundaries that communicate, I'm willing to talk, but I'm not emotionally available to be played with. And that tone, that unshakable calm, forces her to confront the reality that she's no longer dealing with the man she thought she left behind. That's when everything shifts, when she realizes she can't just pick up where she left off, that your time, your attention, and your emotional access are no longer guaranteed. It's not game playing, it's growth, it's leadership, it's refusing to let comfort dictate connection. Because if the past was messy, then the present must be different, and difference begins with you. So hold your ground, let the silence speak before you do. Let her feel that your life has moved on, not in bitterness, but in purpose. Because the moment you no longer chase clarity from her is the moment she starts chasing presence from you. When she reappears, what often catches most men off guard isn't just her presence. It's the memories she awakens, the emotions, the doubts, the inner conflict. That's why it's essential to establish emotional distance before responding. Not physical distance, emotional. It means detaching from the version of yourself that once needed her, craved her validation, or tolerated her absence. Because if you answer her from the same emotional space where she left you, you risk re-entering the same cycle. You're not building a new chapter, you're reopening an old wound. Emotional distance isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the capacity to separate what you feel from what you choose to act on. Just because something stirs in you when she texts or calls doesn't mean you have to follow that feeling. You can observe it without being consumed by it. And that's the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is immediate, emotional, and often regrettable. Response is grounded, intentional, and powerful. So instead of staring off into space, when you say, as a parent, so when she reaches out, let your emotions breathe before they speak. Let them settle so you're not blinded by nostalgia or false hope. What many men fail to realize is that emotional distance gives you vision. It lets you see her clearly, not as the woman you hoped she would be, but as the woman she's showing herself to be now. Is she reaching out because she truly sees your value, or is she bored, lonely, or looking for a temporary comfort? That's hard to determine when your heart is still tangled in the past. But when you've created emotional space, you're no longer looking at her through the lens of longing. You're looking at her through the lens of truth. That truth might be hard. It might reveal that her reappearance is more about her needs than your worth. It might show you that she still carries the same patterns, the same inability to commit, the same emotional immaturity. But it also might show you growth, and here's the thing. You can only recognize growth in someone else when you've done that growth within yourself. That's why emotional distance isn't avoidance, it's maturity. It's the refusal to let your inner peace be disrupted by someone who hasn't earned re-entry into your life. And it's not about pretending to be indifferent either. You can feel, you can remember, but you don't have to return. Just because she circles back doesn't mean the story should continue. Maybe the lesson was meant to be in the ending. Maybe her return is a test, not an invitation. A test of how far you've come, how deeply you've healed, how firmly you stand in who you are now. Emotional distance allows you to answer that test without compromise. When you respond from that space, she'll notice. She'll feel it in your tone, in your posture, in your words. You're no longer seeking her approval, her attention, her affection. You're offering your presence as a gift, not as a request. That's what makes you powerful. Not your silence, not your coldness, but your calm, your ability to remain centered when the past knocks on your door. Because real strength is when the past returns and you no longer need it to validate your future. When she reappears, it's tempting to slip into old patterns, to rush back into communication, to let your curiosity and lingering emotions lead the way. But if you want to respond with power, you need to master the art of observation before engagement. You don't owe her immediate attention, and you certainly don't owe her the version of you that used to jump at the slightest hint of interest. What you owe yourself is discernment. Observation is the gateway to control. It allows you to read her energy, not just her words, because people often say one thing, but their patterns, their timing, their consistency or lack of it say much more. Take a step back and study the timing of her return. Why now? What changed? What triggered her to suddenly reappear in your life after absence, silence, or maybe even rejection? Is it genuine remorse, a realization of your value? Or is it boredom, convenience, or a failed rebound? If you don't pause to ask those questions, you'll fall right back into emotional territory without a map. And that's exactly where power gets lost. When you observe first, you give yourself the gift of space. Space to see whether her presence is sincere or strategic. And don't just listen to what she says, watch what she does. Does her energy align with consistency, effort, and transparency? Or is she breadcrumbing you with vague messages, subtle flirtations, or emotional teasers just to see if she still has access to your attention? Because that's what a lot of people do. They don't come back because they want to rebuild. They come back to make sure the door is still open. And if you open it too quickly without discernment, you confirm that they still have emotional power over you. Observation helps you resist that. Let her show her intentions over time. Let her efforts speak louder than her words. You don't need to confront her or interrogate her. Just observe. Let her wonder why you're not reacting the way you used to. Let her notice the shift in your energy, the calmness, the patience, the absence of neediness. That silence, that subtle delay in your reply, it speaks volumes. Because you are no longer the man who needs answers. You've become the man who already has them, and now you're simply watching to see if her actions meet your new standards. When you observe before you engage, you reclaim the ability to choose, not react. You give yourself the freedom to decide whether her return adds to your life or drains it. You remind yourself that your peace is not up for negotiation. Most importantly, you create space for clarity to surface. And clarity doesn't come when you rush. It comes when you step back, breathe, and watch the patterns unfold. That's when you'll start to see her not as the fantasy you missed, but as the reality she's presenting now. And that's all that truly matters. Not who she was, but who she is today. You don't need to respond immediately. You don't need to validate her reappearance with instant availability. Observation is your power now. Let it do the work. Let her feel the difference. Let her see the man who no longer reacts from emotion, but from truth. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, restrained, and incredibly intentional. When she reappears after disappearing or pulling away, your greatest strength might come from how little you chase and how much you choose not to explain. You don't owe her a recap of everything she missed, and you certainly don't need to validate her by immediately engaging. There's power in not trying to convince someone of your worth anymore, because if she's didn't see it before, and it takes your silence now for her to recognize it, then her return isn't necessarily about growth. It's about contrast. She felt your absence, and now she's curious. Let her sit with that curiosity. Moments like this, your instinct might be to talk it all out, to bring clarity, to seek understanding, or maybe to reconnect because part of you still misses her. But you have to remember that silence is a filter. When you no longer try to justify your distance or explain your shift in energy, you allow people to show their true colors. You give them space to reveal whether they came back with genuine intent or simply because they felt the loss of control. That silence doesn't mean you're avoiding conflict. It means you've mastered emotional discipline. Not everything needs to be spoken to be understood. Sometimes the lack of a reaction says everything. When you don't chase, when you don't explain, you send a very clear message. You've moved beyond the emotional grip that used to keep you entangled. And that's unsettling to someone who once depended on your emotional response for validation. When your silence replaces the long messages, the calls, and the emotional debates, you shift the dynamic completely. You create tension, but it's the kind that stems from your strength, not your weakness. She might try to provoke a response subtly or directly. She might mention memories, compliment you, or even show signs of vulnerability just to get a spark out of you. But if your goal is clarity, not comfort, then you'll learn to wait. You'll give her room to prove herself, and in that space, you begin to recognize whether her words align with meaningful action. You'll know if she's showing up to rebuild something real or just returning to test the waters of your attention. That distinction only becomes clear when you resist the need to fill the silence. Don't explain your evolution. Let her feel it. Let her notice the difference between the man she used to know and the one standing before her now. That shift, quiet, firm, self-assured, is often more impactful than anything you could say. It's not about playing games or being cold. It's about honoring the boundaries you built while she was gone. It's about realizing that not everyone who comes back deserves a front row seat in your life again. They need to earn it. And if they can't navigate your new standards with patience and sincerity, then their return was never really about love. It was about comfort, control, or ego. You're no longer that man who scrambles to keep someone close. You've become the man who knows his worth so deeply that silence becomes a form of self-respect. And when you carry that energy, the right people won't need chasing or convincing. They'll recognize it, rise to it, and match it. So don't rush to respond. Don't explain the silence. Just let it do its job. There comes a time when you need to recognize that not everyone who reappears deserves access to the same version of you they once knew. Just because someone circles back doesn't mean you have to open the door the same way you did before. Growth isn't just about becoming stronger, it's about becoming wiser with your emotional investments. When she reappears, it's tempting to revert, to slip back into old patterns and comforts, but that's not where your strength lives anymore. Your strength now is in discernment, in your ability to see beyond the surface and evaluate whether this return is rooted in real change or momentary nostalgia. You see, people often return when they feel your absence more than they expected. Not necessarily because they miss you for who you are, but because they miss how you made them feel. That distinction is crucial. If she's coming back because the world didn't respond to her the way you did, because no one else matched your loyalty, your patience, your depth, then her return isn't necessarily about you, it's about the emotional gap your absence created. And if you mistake that for love, you'll get trapped again in a cycle that only ends with your disappointment. That's why you have to observe with clarity. Let her actions speak before her words do. Watch how consistent she is. Watch how she respects the space you've built, how she aligns with your values now, not the man she once knew, but the man you've become in her absence. Because the man who had to pick up his own pieces after being left behind, the man who built strength from silence and self-discipline, that man doesn't settle for crumbs anymore. He doesn't chase presence, he measures intention. Don't be swayed by emotions dressed up as apologies. You've heard them before. The promises to do better, the sudden interest in your life again, the questions that dig just deep enough to seem sincere, but sincerity isn't spoken, it's proven. If she's not willing to walk through discomfort with you, to repair what was broken with consistency and accountability, then all you're doing is entertaining an echo of the past, and you've outgrown that echo. This isn't about being cold or unforgiving. It's about honoring your healing. You bled in silence while she moved on. You found strength in solitude when no one came looking. You evolved without her applause. And now that she's back, you don't owe her the man she left behind, you owe yourself the man you've become. That means holding your ground, not falling into old habits just because they feel familiar. Familiarity is not the same as compatibility, and returning doesn't equal reconnection. It's just the first step, and you decide if the next one is even worth taking. This is where power lives, not in being reactive, but in being selective, not in holding grudges, but in holding standards. You're not here to punish her, you're here to protect the version of you that paid the price for her absence. If she's not willing to rise to that version of you, to meet you where you are now instead of dragging you back to where you used to be, then let her feel the door close, because this time, you're not just guarding your heart, you're guarding your peace. And peace once earned is never something you compromise again.